What's up everybody and welcome to a new video. And in this video we're going to go over my nodes for tuples in Python. So here the first node is a definition. So I define tuples to be a collection of items in a particular order. So they have actually the same definition as a list. So here we also said a collection of items in a particular order. However, in contrast to lists, they are immutable. And we will talk about mutability when we talk about here the miscellaneous topics. And then here mutability. So if you don't know what that is, then I will put a link to that into the video description. But for now, I just want to show you how to actually create a tuple. So therefore, let's here create a variable called numbers. And then to create a tuple, you simply use the parentheses. And then similar to lists, you can then list all your items here or elements in this tuple by separating them with a comma. So for example, if I then say here 1, 2, 3, then this way then we have here created this tuple with these three elements here. And then here I also have some side notes. The first one states that tuples can also be denoted without using parentheses. So for example, what you also can say here is numbers equals 1, 2, 3. And this then here is also a tuple, and I can show that by using the built-in function type. And then here, if I pass in our numbers, then you can see that this is actually also here a tuple. So that's the first side note. The second one states that tuples can be empty. So for example, if I create here a variable called empty tuple, then I can create an empty tuple simply by using those parentheses without putting anything in that. And again, we can check that by using this type function and then here put in our empty tuple. And now if I run this, then you can see this is also a tuple. So that's the second side note. And then the third one states that tuples with just one element need a trailing comma. And to show that, I've prepared here these two variables. So here both variables have here these parentheses. And both has just one element, this one here, and the only difference is that here we have this trailing comma. And now if I again use this type function for our tuple 1, then you can see that this is actually an integer. And if I do the same thing for tuple 2, then you can see that this one is actually a tuple. And that's because in this first instance here, those parentheses are interpreted as regular parentheses. So parentheses that you would use in a calculation, for example. So for instance, if I say here 1 plus 2 and then that times 3, then in this expression here, those parentheses are simply regular parentheses. So if I run this, then we get here the result of 9. And that's because we first add these two numbers here up, so 1 plus 2, which is 3, and then multiply that with 3, which is then 9. However, if I now put in here a comma, then this now is a parenthesis, a tuple with just one element, and that one element is here this 3. So this expression is basically, or is actually then just the same as saying this here, so 3, comma, and then that times 3. And now if I run this, then you can see that we get this example where we just multiplied our tuple times 3. So instead of just having this 1 3 here, we then have those 3 3s. Okay, so those are my side notes. And with that now, we've covered how tuples are defined and how you can create them. Then the next note is about some typical use cases for tuples. And the first one is when you want a listing of things that doesn't need to be changed throughout the program. So for example, here I have prepared a variable called dimensions, and then here I specified these particular dimensions here. And let's say you don't want to change the dimensions throughout your program, then you can show that intention by putting them into a tuple. So that's the first typical use case. And the second one is when you want to return multiple values in a function. So to show that, I've prepared here another example. So here is this example function. So this is called determine min max, and it simply returns here the minimum number and the maximum number of a given list. So now if I run this function here and then put in, for example, a list 1, 2, and 3, and now if I execute the cell, then you can see it returns a tuple where the first element is the minimum number and the second one is the maximum number of the given list. So those are two typical use cases for tuples. And then the last note is about the available methods for tuples. So here the first one is count. So with that you can simply count how often a particular element appears for the given tuple. So for example, to show that, I've prepared here this tuple. So here we have the letters A, B, C, A, B. And now let's count how often the letter A appears. So therefore we simply say tup.count and then A. And if I run this here, then we get here this 2 because we have here these 2 A's. So now let's also see what happens when we try to count something that is not in our tuple. So for example, the letter Z. So if I say here, for example, then tup.count and then Z, then we get here a 0 because there is no Z in our tuple here. Okay, so that's count. Next we have then index, and index simply returns the index of the given value. So for example, if I say here tup index A, then it returns the 0 because the first A that it finds is this one, which is at index 0. So this is the basic use of index. However, this also has some optional parameters, namely start and stop. So let's first use just start. So therefore let's here say that we want to start at index 1. So we're only going to look at these elements here. So now if I run this, then we get here a 3 because in this case then the first A that it finds is this one, which is at index 3. So now let's also use the stop parameter. So we're going to say here 3. And now if I run this, then we get here a value error. And that's because this 3 here is not inclusive. So we are actually only looking at those 2 elements. And since there's not an A, we then get here this value error. Okay, so those are the available methods for tuples. And with that, we've already covered all my notes for tuples. So we've reached the end of this video. And then in the next video, we will go over my notes for dictionaries in Python. So thanks for watching and hopefully I will see you in the next video.